This talk is based on a book I wrote called 50 Shades of Grey Aliens, which came about because I started reading about the issue of aliens and UFOs when I was in 6th grade. Now, I can't say I've kept up with those issues ever since, but in a way, there's really nothing to be kept up with because nothing's really changed, okay? We might have more supposed videos and photos, but really it's all the same since way back then. We have various claims that we can explain when we have tournaments. We have hoaxes, but we do have that small percentage that are actually unexplainable events. So that's really always been the same. Yeah, it was that one. It was that one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, here we go. Now, as an author, when I set my mind to write a book, it's advantageous to think about, well, what are my parameters, right? So, for example, I wrote a whole series called What Does the Bible Say About? And then each volume is a different topic. So that makes it very easy for me. Okay, I'm dealing in the box. It's right here. These are my parameters. I can focus on that. I know where to start and stop, and that's great. It's very nice and convenient. This book, not so much. The way I think of it is, I didn't take a rifle approach writing this book, where it makes one little hole and it's nice and neat. I took more like a shotgun approach, and I went in about 100 directions at once, just covering these issues from every conceivable vantage point I could think of. So in that sense, it was a lot of fun to write, and it covers a lot of ground, and you can read through it cover to cover, or just look at whichever chapter strike your fancy at any given time that you pick it up. So now one thing Howard and I have focused on through these lectures is defining terms. Right? You begin by defining your terms. You don't jump into the middle or the conclusion of a discussion. You start by saying, this is what I mean. This is what I'm talking about. These are my definitions. And with this issue, let's start right here. So when we think about aliens and UFOs, if you say, let's talk about aliens and UFOs, you have already created an enormously messy problem because you're jumbling together two things that may not have anything to do with each other. For instance, there's people who claim they've had experiences with aliens and they've never seen a UFO. There's people who've seen UFOs and never had an experience with an alien. So that right there tells you that these are two different categories. All right? Two different categories. And in fact, some people have claimed to have seen a UFO, along with which they had experiences with aliens. So there's a third category right there. So that alone will help a lot in how to begin thinking about it, begin discussing it, because these topics are very complicated, very fascinating, very frightening, very abstract, very odd, and have been discussed for a very long time. So we see that there's three major categories just at the outset. So let's focus on one, UFOs. What could they be? Well, they could actually be alien craft, right? And if so, they could be three-dimensional nuts and bolts type of a vehicle, or they could be energy orbs, some kind of morphing vehicle or something like that. It could actually be just atmospheric cloud, ball of lightning, just some kind of natural phenomena that's unusual. And people say, hey, look, a UFO. It could be aircraft, it could be birds, it could be balloons, it could be satellites. It could be a hoax. It could be secret government tech, right? Which would lead us back to the issue of that it could be an aircraft. This is Kenneth Arnold, and he reported seeing craft that were illustrated right there. And it is from his description that a newspaper report came up with the term flying saucer. Okay, Kenneth Arnold. That's what he claims he saw. He referred to it as a chevron shape. But look at what was the highest tech, the secret tech back in the day when he saw that. It was called a flying wing. Okay, so yes, he saw something that was definitely unusual. and that people were not aware of. But it turns out that now we know that it was just a secret tech back in that day, and he just didn't know what he was looking at.
So question, is the photograph on the left authentic, or is that a diagram?
It's an illustration.
Okay.
It's an illustration based on his description of what he saw. So then there came up a time when people started reporting seeing black triangular UFOs, right? Well, then we end up finding about the stealth bomber and the stealth fighter, which are very much like that. Very flying wing-like and very black and triangular, right? Then let's look at another major category, which is aliens, right? So the claim is that they're from another universe, from somewhere within our solar system, or, sorry, not another universe. In this case, it's that they are from within our universe, but another solar system, or just the far reaches of space. Or they're from some kind of alternate reality, which could be a multiverse, another dimension within our universe. It could be spirits, angelic, demonic realm. They could actually be bioorganisms, or actually spirits, angels, or demons. It could be some kind of government ops. It could be a hoax. Okay, so what I'm trying to show here is that we have three main categories, below which there are subcategories and sometimes subcategories below those. Okay? Now, the human experience with these phenomena, it could have been a dream, could have been a hallucination, could have been a hypnotic suggestion, could have been a close encounter, of which there's various kinds, and could have been what is termed experiencers, abductees, contactees, channelers, various different levels of experiences with something. Okay? So again, you can't just start chatting about aliens. You need to slow down and say, well, what are we talking about? Let's define our terms, let's categorize. Okay? Now, as we'll get into a little bit later, think about, for instance, channelers. Now, when you listen to people who claim to have had channeling-related experience with aliens, why is it they sound exactly like people who claim to be channeling the spirits of the dead? I mean, they have the same shtick, the same exact concept, the same MO, right? Why on earth would that be?
Same source.
You're jumping ahead. So now I'd like to tell you about my own UFO sighting, and of course I haven't even touched upon the fact that UFO, literally unidentified flying object, right? So again, it could be anything. It could be, boy, that airplane was so far away I couldn't identify it. It's a UFO. Well, I had a UFO experience last year. It was literally a UFO, unidentified floating object. But I didn't see any aliens, okay? It wasn't anything really out there, bizarre, or abstract, so I won't have to wear this, okay? Although if I did, you know, I'd look like a Hershey's Kiss. So, I found myself standing outside of a building at, let's just say, a nationally relevant lab, due to a fire alarm. And actually, I thought I was part of two Milgram experiments, if you remember the Milgram experiments from back in the 70s. Because at one point, I was standing here, maybe a fourth of the people were on this side of me, 3/4 on this side, and the 1/4 started walking back to the building, and the 3/4 didn't. So I was like, oh, do I go with this group or do I stay with this group? But then I could tell that this group was heading to the back door, so I started walking back with them. And then I thought I was in another Milgram experiment because I noticed the people on this side were looking up over my head. So I'm like, oh, okay, let me, and there was this thing floating there. I would say it was maybe it looked really like a black PVC pipe sealed on both ends. Maybe 8 foot long, maybe 4 inches wide. It was maybe 10, 12 feet up in the air. And it just floated off. You know, the wind was carrying it. Okay, I wouldn't say it was being piloted. And there's a lot of experiments that are done in that place, so I don't know who was doing whatever. So when I turned to the guy next to me, by the way, this building was working with what they call space vehicles. Okay, so these guys know this stuff. So I turned to this guy and I go, "What is that?" And he points to the guy next to him and he says, all right, look, I'll just say it. He says, "It's a flying turd." And I thought, whoa, buddy, hold back with the high-tech in-house language there. Come on, man. So, what I did find out about it is, as the wind was blowing it was like I said, it was floating. It was just obviously being blown by the wind. It wasn't flying around. It was just floating. But it did remain parallel to the ground, and it did remain pointing east and west. In other words, it wasn't being blown all around. And like I said, it was a PVC pipe. That I did think was rather odd. It just remained perfectly just floating off like that, and it kept going and going just like that. Okay. So nobody knows what it is. I did notice on the fire trucks, there was these black tube-looking things. So one day I did approach a firefighter and I asked him about that. What do you guys have in there, helium or something? Could that thing kind of detach and float off? And he said, "Nah, there's no way. They're not filled with that, and these things are like 40 pounds. They're not going anywhere." So, okay, nobody knows what that was. And maybe it was nothing. My point really in mentioning it is that it made me more empathetic about all these ridiculous and bad videos and photos we see of this stuff, right? Because I'm watching it and thinking about it and talking about it, and then I go, "Oh, wait a minute. I have my wife's old cell phone with me." Okay, the reason I had it is because it was dying, and I just had it to take photographs. And if I took maybe 3 photographs, it would die. So, I got it out, and I'm like, tick, 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 okay, it's gone, okay, it's dead. But then, oh, wait a minute, I also have my iPod with me, which is like 15 years old. There's no zooming capabilities or nothing, so I actually got a photos and video of it, but I'm not even showing them to you because it's not worth seeing. Just picture a grain of rice in the sky, a black grain of rice in the sky. That's exactly what it looks like. So it made me more empathetic because by the time I thought about I have these devices that I could use to take a photograph or video, it was too late. It was too far away. I couldn't zoom in. So anyhow, that was that. So let's talk about the concept of the 50 shades of gray aliens, right? What do I mean by that? Gray aliens. Now, people have reported having experiences with every size and shape and color of alien you could possibly never imagine. But the grays, as they call them, have definitely taken center stage. They're really the poster children of the phenomena. Although another favorite category of mine is what they call the Nordics, which I find incredibly convenient because these are aliens that look exactly like human beings. So that always makes it easier. So what I wanted to do is to research the history of this stereotypical large bulbous head, big diamond, almond eyes, and where did that come from? And as I look back in history, in a way, the minute I started thinking in those terms, as far as culture, what had culture produced as far as why that particular image, the minute I started, I really found my conclusion. So this is from H.G. Wells. He wrote an essay called "The Man of the Year Million." That was in 1893. And already, well, I'm done because that's what he was depicting. Shriveled up little body because we wouldn't be doing physical labor, and little mouths that don't really need to eat anything, because what they do is they get into these vats of fluids that they absorb through their bodies. Large skull, because the brain would grow, and along with the large skull, the eyes get enlarged as well. And so there it is. That's really, I think, where it came from. Now, what I want you to focus on here is it's the man of the year million. It's not the alien from another planet. Okay, H.G. Wells was imagining what would future human beings look like. And that was his conclusion. That's what they would look like. Okay? Then here's from another book that's, if you look at the name of it, Ethiopia, that's the name of the book. It's just Aphrodite backwards, by the way. Okay, so the description of these is that in this novel, in this fictional novel, these are the inhabitants of the inner earth. They're less than 5 feet high, skin the color of light blue putty, forehead extended in an unbroken line from the crown to the cheekbone, and the chubby tip of an aborted nose, without nostrils, formed a short projection. There was no semblance of an eye, for there were no sockets. So besides the eye issue, everything else is your typical gray alien. But again, this was this fictional writer's depiction of what inner Earth, not extraterrestrials, would look like. Then in 1919, we get into a really strange category. Because Aleister Crowley, who, by the way, was the most infamous black magician of the last century, right? Extremely influential occultist, he claims to have had an experience with this being that he called Lamb, and there's your basic typical gray alien. Now, what I did there is the thing in his illustration, the eyes are very small and slanted, but you can see above the eyes that there is the what seem to be the outlines of your stereotypical large almond alien eyes, right? So just what is the black magician dealing with? Well, he was part of many magical orders, occult orders. One of them was the OTO, right? The Order Templi Orientis, who in 1994 they published this being for some odd reason on their publication Starfire. And again, it's very stereotypically gray alien. So again, why are they depicting these beings that they're interacting with on the basis of occultism? Why do they look like that? Now here's so what I did in the book. There's probably 100 pages in the book of nothing but illustrations from book covers and magazine covers of golden era fantasy and sci-fi. Okay, such as this, 1927. Now you look at that body, stereotypically gray alien, large head, small shriveled up body, the machine man, right, of Artarthia. So again, this is an illustration of a man, a human, not an alien. So the point being, it's this kind of idea. 1931, the man who evolved, right? You see what I'm saying? Is the golden era fantasy and sci-fi writers, that's what they were thinking human beings would end up looking like. Okay, so the concept they're playing with is, speaking of time travel, that human beings would travel back in time for the future, and this is what they would look like. That's, all of them are writing stories and depicting stories based on this concept. You see that? Now here's a fascinating one, 1954 Strange Adventures. One more jolt of my evolution ray, Captain Comet, and you'll be a giant bodiless brain, just like me. And you see it's basically a human being super evolved, super fast, and he turns out to be what? Large head, small body. But again, it's a human being. See that? Now we jump to 1934, very stereotypical gray alien. If Tomorrow Comes, A Tale of Two Worlds, for the book. And then jumping to 1989 with Whitley Strieber's Communion. And that's really the modern day stereotypical look right there. Now, Strieber, he's a fascinating character. He claims that, well, okay, he has never claimed to have been having experience with aliens. He decides to call them visitors. Okay, and he's tried out about 100 different theories about what they might be. But he's always talking about the grays, gray alien, right? And he even wrote a book called The Grays. So I asked him, well, because he commissioned this book cover. So I asked him, well, why is this visitor on your book cover of you? Why isn't it gray? And all he said is that he doesn't know, but that's just what he said. And that just goes down in history as one of many inconsistencies in Strieber's claims that just kind of gets shrugged off because, well, if he doesn't know, he doesn't know. He knows about grays and he knows this one wasn't. What are you going to do? 1935, another Astounding Tales cover, Atlas All Thinking. Same kind of thing. With a bigger head would come a bigger brain. In 1939, even the Wizard of Oz got in on the act. Right? Very stereotypical. 1940, Tales of Wonder. Again, the world of tomorrow. Not an alien world, the world here on Earth, but of tomorrow, and the guy looks like a big bulbous head. See my point? 1957, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen ends up with this gigantic head. And it's the same kind of idea. He's progressing, he's evolving, but he's a human being, and that's what he looks like. Even Superman himself got into that act at one point. 1959, Superman of the future. Okay, you get that? It's still Superman, but he's from the future. Although, I will point out that Superman is an alien, so I don't know. In fact, Superman was created by two Jewish writers, so they modeled him after Moses, by the way. Right? He comes to Earth in a single occupancy craft and is raised by Earthlings, just like Moses ended up being raised by Pharaoh's daughter by traveling there in a single occupancy craft. And what's Superman's real name?
Hello.
His Earth name? Kal-El. I mean, is that a biblical name or what? Right? El. Samuel, right? Elijah. And his dad is from Jordan. So anyhow, that's just a second. The Flash, same thing, 1968. I'm a swellhead physically and mentally, right? Still a human being, and this is happening to him. Venom, of course. Even Spider-Man himself ends up depicted in this very strange, absolutely gigantic eyes. Although in some iterations of the tale, Venom himself is an alien, but still. 1964, The Outer Limits visit from when? The future, right? A white smocked, strange-looking little man suddenly appears on every channel of every television set around the world as he speaks. His voice is translated into the language of each country. The man is broadcasting from the year 3000 AD to the people of today's world. So again, the concept of a human being communicating with the past, and what does he look like? Very stereotypical. Okay. And from the movie AI, 2001, anyone know what this is supposed to be? Anyone they're great aliens, but they're actually supposed to be the new phase of technology, which is silicon-based. So I did find it fascinating when Spielberg is imagining the tech of thousands of years into the future. They end up looking very much like your typical alien. Okay. Now, this is to show that the two on the left are from old television shows. They're from old sci-fi TV shows. And you can see the outfit, right? It's very pronounced, very outdated by our standards, but that's how that TV show was depicting aliens. The thing is that the one on the right is a person's description of an alien they claim to have interacted with. Same here. Look at from Barney and Betty Hill's description, and Patty Price, Maya Reisker, all of them are claiming, hey, I had these experiences with real aliens. Look at this. But the outfit is the same that they would have seen on the sci-fi TV show. Right? Same with these claims of real experiences. And so there's just something about seeing something that is either unusual and either lying about it, doing a hoax, or just having some kind of mental issue where you start projecting, you start thinking you're seeing something you didn't. Even Don Rickles and Mork and Mindy, look at their very specific outfits, right, with an upside-down triangle on their chest, and then we have descriptions below of people saying, no, this is really the alien I interacted with. Well, it's the same exact thing, right? Even this is very telling, right? It's the same kind of thing. Here's from The Twilight Zone and another TV show compared to what people claim they actually saw. I mean, it's very, very obvious that consciously or not, they're pulling it out of these old sci-fi shows. And so the point was that the speculation began with fantasy and sci-fi about human beings traveling back from the future. And then all of a sudden, the claim is, wait a minute. I mean, how many times can you tell the same story, right? So the new spin was, let's claim that those are aliens. And then that enters pop culture, is essentially what I traced down chronologically. Because it was very consistent. These are human beings from the future, human beings from the future, human beings from the future. And all of a sudden, they're not actually human beings from the future, they're actually aliens. Now, this one is an example of an old hoax. You can see on the left, it's just a photograph of some military men hanging out with a child, and all of a sudden somebody superimposed an image of some kind of alien over it. Okay, 1950, this is being done. Same here, 1950. You have on the right the women with these old-fashioned baby carriages, and then the two men standing on either side of the baby carriage, and all of a sudden, somebody decides to, whatever that's supposed to be, some kind of alien. Another hoax from back in the day. Okay, I'm going to take Howard's lead, and as he cut it short a little bit for your sake, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to jump to here now. Michael Horn. He is the official authorized American media representative for Billy Meyer. Okay. Billy Meyer claims to have had experiences with UFOs and aliens going back to the 70s. And as many of these people, he's been there, he's done that, he's traveled through time, he's been to other planets, he's had interactions with aliens, he's done it all. He even traveled back in time and had a conversation with Jesus, which we'll get to in just a second. So when I was writing about the Billy Meyer situation claims on my website, I was contacted by Michael Horn, okay, who claims that the Meyer information is the most important story in all of human history. The Meyer information basically saying Billy Meyer is telling us what aliens are telling him. And this is what he wrote to me. Good gosh, your attempt to discredit the bunk the Meyer case are so weak that I can't even rouse myself to post comments on the respective pages, which I take as a compliment. Because, obviously, I feel an emotion and I must express it. But I'm not actually going to try to debunk anything you're saying. I'm just going to tell you you're a bit dum-dum. Which, that's Internet 101. I'm sorry to say. Yes, sir.
Is Billy Meyer any relation to Billy Pilgrim, who came on the second time, Slaughterhouse Five?
Okay, no, I'm not sure to what you were referring to. So.
In Slaughterhouse Five, Billy
Oh.
Pilgrim became on the second time.
Oh,
Never mind.
I see. Okay, gotcha. No
Wow.
worries. You made a little connection there. So anyhow, I wrote back to Horn, and I was very, thank you for commenting, and I told him nice thing. He was putting out a comic book at the time based on the Meyer experiences, and I told him, wow, that's some really good artwork you have. It's just nice because if you can't be graceful first with people who are being mean to you, then don't bother applying. And now speaking of, so this lecture series is called World Views and Views. And speaking of world views, that came in because he's telling me, well, Billy Meyer made a bunch of predictions, right, through the aliens. And of course, all the Meyer stuff is so riddled with problems and it's been debunked at every conceivable level, but whatever. Now, my worldview tells me if you make a prediction, right, if you prophesy, and it doesn't come true, then I know you're a false prophet or a false predictor.
Yes.
But if you prophesy or you predict, and it does come true, but you say, in whatever manner you're putting it, let us go after other gods, then guess what? I still reject that. Right? That's my worldview's way to keep me safe from any kind of stuff like this, where even if it comes true, and Billy Meyer is most certainly turning us away towards an essence of some kind of alien God concept. Right? Now, Meyer claims to have traveled back in time, he had a conversation with Jesus, and then he says he found manuscripts of what he called the Talmud Emmanuel. Now, it's a little hard to pronounce. It's basically Emmanuel, but instead of beginning with an E, beginning with a J. All right, but there's no real J sound in Hebrew, so it sounds more like a Y. So it is still kind of like Emmanuel, right? Emmanuel.
Hallelujah.
Well, he claims, Jesus wasn't his real name. His real name is Emmanuel, which in a way it is, right? His name is Emmanuel, but he's referred to as Yehoshua, or as a nickname Yeshua, or we call him Jesus. So anyhow, he claims he found this ancient manuscript, but wouldn't you know it, by golly, it got destroyed, but not before he could translate it into German. And so he published that Talmud Emmanuel. He has no evidence for it whatsoever. And when I was writing about this claim and its inaccuracies, I was contacted by Oregon State University research professor emeritus Jim Deardorff, and who has stated about that Talmud Emmanuel that it was discovered in Jerusalem in 1963, ushered in the New Age while exposing the New Testament Gospels as being more corrupt than even the Jesus Seminar suspects. Now, he contacted me as well about the stuff I was writing about, and the one and only thing he took issue with was that I referred to him as a shill. So we agreed that I would change that term to proponent. That was it. Everything else I wrote about it, he didn't touch. So again, that was complimentary to me. Now, one thing when it comes to these issues that you cannot ever seem to get away from, UFOs, aliens, or both, is the occult. You cannot seem to get away from it whatsoever when you poke at it, at least. Sometimes it's right up front, like with the Alistair Crowley stuff. Sometimes it's not, but if you look behind the scenes, there it is. I'm telling you, it's inevitable. Speaking of Meyer, you kind of hear two sides. One side is this guy's just minding his own business, living up in the mountains, and all of a sudden an alien shows up and starts interacting with him. But in reality, it began, or he claims that it began, when he was in India, living in an ashram, and that's when he started having these experiences, okay? So he's essentially in an occult setting, just by any other name, okay? Same thing with the streamer, same thing. Oh, I'm just minding my business and these beings show up. Well, wait a minute. He was specifically in his meditation room in his house in New York when he started having these experiences. Same thing with someone I'm acquainted with, who claims that he was in some kind of Buddhist outing place somewhere in Europe, and again, he's had all these strange experiences. You just cannot get away from it. I found this very interesting very recently on the Dr. Phil show. The tagline was, "Woman claims electronic harassers are making her see alien creatures," and the description is, Debbie says after watching a documentary about aliens 3 years ago, she decided to try summoning UFOs on her own. She claims she then began seeing aliens, hybrids, alien animal creatures in her home. Okay? Now, what does summoning contextually have to do with aliens or UFOs? So apparently you can just kind of call to them and they somehow know that you're doing so, and then they start showing up. Okay, but that should be really telling. Again, why is it that supposed channelers of the dead and supposed channelers of aliens have the same exact shtick? You see what I mean? Now this is very telling. Barbara Marciniak, again, she's a very well-known person in that realm of alien contact. This is what she says. I was really captivated by the Seth material channeled by Jane Roberts. The main message was that your thoughts create your reality and form my own experience. Sorry, I was about to say I'm dyslexic, and after I do a certain amount of reading, it starts messing me up. So thank you for catching that. And from my own experiences, I knew that to be true. In May of 1988, I followed an enticing impulse and went on a sacred journey tour to Egypt and Greece. While traveling to these ancient sites, I sensed a familiarity and felt that I had lived there in other times. The last stop was Delphi, where unbeknownst to me, female oracles in tranced states had served as official soothsayers for centuries. As I walked through the entrance to the temple, my body was hit with what I would now call cellular memories. I had a strong impulse to return to my room and practice channeling. I sat down on the floor with my back up against the bed, recalled my visit to the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, and said out loud, I intend to be a clear channel now. After a few minutes, I began speaking in a voice other than my own, and the source soon identified themselves as the Pleiadians. Now, what does any of that terminology have to do with contacting aliens from another planet? Occultism, right? Now, what's also fascinating to me is that Billy Meyer claims anyone claiming to be in touch with the Pleiadians instantly identifies themselves as a fraud. Right. Okay, now, even though he himself first claimed to have been in touch with Pleiadians, but then, as is common with the Meyer material, he changes his tune. Actually, they're actually from a place called Plejara. So they're not Pleiadians, they're Plejarans. And they told him anyone claiming to be in touch with Pleiadians is a fraud. So, you know, when they're fighting it out, just sit back and let them, I suppose. I mean, you know, what do you want me to do? So now, Whitley Strieber also, he has been there, done that. He slices, dices, chops, and blends, right? He's traveled through time. He's reincarnated. He's been to Mars. And it happens with these guys who, it's as if they're trying to put themselves in the center of history, and everything revolves around them, right? Like he said, I played an influential role in ancient Rome, and everything. Anybody brings up anything that's abstract or paranormal, he's doing that, he's done that. To the point where a few years ago his wife passed away. Now he recently published a book that he just now co-wrote with her posthumously. Okay? So he claims that he's co-writing books with his deceased wife, so you can add necromancy to his repertoire now. You know? I've heard of ghostwriting, but this is ridiculous. Yeah, I mean. Now another interesting thing is in the movie Communion and also in the movie Fire in the Sky about the Travis Walton experience. Both movies depicted something I found interesting. So in Communion, he's having experiences with the great aliens, but then the bottom half of the alien's face kind of comes off, and you can see there's some kind of creature. It's just a mask. There's like an organic mouth behind it. And he's saying, oh, you're that smart. You're not going to let us see you, are you? It's like a Russian doll thing. And then in the Walton movie, same thing. He's aboard an alien spacecraft, and he sees a great alien, but then he goes up and he realizes it's just a spacesuit. They don't actually look like that. In the movie, they kind of look like, I don't know, E.T.'s evil twin in a way. Although he also claims he had experiences with aliens that look exactly like human beings. So I asked Whitley Strieber and Travis Walton about that. I said, you know, I saw this in your movies. Is that your experience? And they both actually said, no, that was just Hollywood stuff. That's too bad, because that was pretty interesting to me. That the whole alien stereotypical great thing was just a facade, which I still think it is, but on a very different level, you know what I mean? So I found this interesting movie called Alien Agenda Project Grey. It's just a sci-fi movie, but somebody knows something, because these are the movies' depiction of the alien spacecraft. They're displaying all kinds of pentacles, right? Encircled pentagrams on the bottom of them. I thought it was very insightful. And especially living here in New Mexico, we see a lot of alien, what I call propaganda. Here's just a billboard I took a photo of one day. This is a Crystal Springs water advertisement, and it's being abducted by a giant spacecraft. What does that have to do with anything, right? Here's a little kid, one of those coin machines, alien eggs, and it says it's an invasion. This one was really odd. It's advertisement for fitness training. Okay, I'm not sure what an alien and a spacecraft have to do with it, but hey, if I can get buff, then sure. I found this interesting too. Dr. Faustus summoning Mephistopheles, depicted standing in his magic circle with a little demon appearing. It looks exactly like from the Star Wars movie. Luke Skywalker, is that Luke? Or Anakin Skywalker in his circle before Yoda. It looks the same to me. Incidentally, Anakin would be the Aramaic plural form of what the Bible calls Anakin, right? The ancient peoples, but that's another story. Same kind of thing here. Mephistopheles, Yoda, and another character from Star Wars, looking very much like what people, God bless us, what people claim they have actually experienced. And now we're coming to the end here. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that were very, very, very complimentary about my book, that were very humbling to me. This is from Joseph Jordan. He's the president and co-founder of CE4 Research Group, who help people who claim to have had alien abduction experiences. And for at least 3 decades, he was involved with MUFON, right, the Mutual UFO Network. These are the guys that will actually come out and do the interviews with people. They'll do the investigations, right? And he said, I could actually borrow some of your work to answer some questions people have asked me. Kudos on what he did with his book. That was extremely surprising and kind of him to do that. Then Jim Wilhelmsen, he was involved with MUFON as a research specialist. And he says, Ken's work boldly considers all angles and perspectives to every aspect of this topic. He provokes the readers to consider all aspects of a situation that many may overlook because it may interfere with our preconceived ideas that, knowingly or not, we want to prove. And then John Rasmus is an Opal researcher and independent investigator. His book contains a great amount of research on the origins of gray aliens, extraterrestrial, dimensional travelers, or demons. The research includes thorough, thank you. Do I ever have a hard time with those words that contain GT and H's and T's? Thorough. Examples from pop culture to the occult. The origins of the modern gray aliens are pieced together. So, someone once told me that alien begins with a Okay. Now, if the Lord is willing and the creeks don't rise, I'll be presenting basically the same talk at Roswell in June or July, right, for their anniversary. And so for that, just a couple of days ago, I was at a certain facility where I took some photographs of some of the displays. So these are obviously what we would call crash test type dummies, right? This is one of the memos talking about Project High Dive, explaining the loss of a dummy near Roswell, New Mexico, although this was in 55 where the alleged crash was 47. But you can see the actual photographs. These are the anthropomorphic dummy. By the way, in high school, anthropomorphic dummy, that was my nickname. Sorry. Again, right over New Mexico, and they would just toss them out of airplanes and just do research based on that. So let me show you a close-up of these guys. I mean, I don't know. I would just imagine if this thing hits the ground after being thrown out of an airplane and its extremities fall off, and you just find the stump of its torso, it's small, with a weird-looking greenish head, I could definitely see somebody saying, wow, I just saw an alien, right? Not to mention that if you see the military going out to recover this thing, and of course it's a secret experiment, they're putting it in a very small box, you could very well end up that way. And with these reports of people saying, oh, they were carrying away very small caskets that contained these little aliens. I don't know, I'm just saying, that's what it seemed like to me.